Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline and this is Made with Books. And first off, welcome to you new subscribers that probably came over here because Shawn from Shawn the Book Maniac tagged me in the mid-year book freakout tag, if that's the name of it, which I'm not filming today. That's gonna be the next video that I will do. But yeah, just thanks to Shawn for giving me, I guess, sort of a shout out in that way, and hello to all of you new subscribers. And yes, today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in the first half of June. And so June is Pride Month, as most of you probably know, and there was actually a Queer Lit readathon going on at the beginning of the month. Now, I was too busy in that week with life stuff to properly participate, but I still wanted to pick up some Queer Lit throughout the month. And so I have so far read 3 books, and I will talk about those first. But before I get into them, I want to recommend a queer TV series that I think is marvelous. If you do watch TV series at all, please check out Please Like Me. It's an Australian show, and it's by comedian Josh Thomas, who is gay himself, and he's also the main protagonist of the series, and he's playing himself in it. I will say though, I think there's really good depiction of mental illness in there as well, in particular of Josh's mom. But I will, because there's quite a few characters in there that deal with mental illness, I will give trigger warnings for self-harm, and for suicide, so just be aware. It is sort of a dramedy, so if you like that sort of thing, definitely check it out. And let's get into the books, the stuff we're actually here for. So the first thing I read for Pride Month was a very famous short story by Annie Proulx, and that was Brokeback Mountain. This, of course, is the story of Jack Twist and Anis Del Mar. It is set in the 1960s, and these two are meeting while sheep herding on Brokeback Mountain, and they fall in love. And basically the story follows their love and their other relationships, because they both go on to leave the mountain and get married, but they keep meeting throughout their life. I thought the story was beautifully written. I definitely want to reread it, because this time I listened to it on audiobook, and insofar I really liked it. And I'm now going on to spoil the ending to say what I didn't like about it. By the way, it's also been turned into a major movie, so you probably know the ending. But if you for some reason don't, and you don't want to, I'm gonna put timestamps in the description box, so you can just skip ahead to the next book if you don't want to. And now I'm gonna spoil the ending, so you've been warned. So basically in the end, Jack Twist dies, and it is very heavily suggested that he was murdered because of the fact that he was gay. And I mean, obviously, Wyoming, 1960s, homosexuality wasn't exactly popular. And I get that this is something that happened and unfortunately still happens, but at the same time, it would be nice to have more stories that depict homosexuality in a more positive light and more like hopeful light. So I think that is possibly one of the downsides of this story. But having said that, I still very much enjoyed it. It was obviously very sad at the end, quite heartbreaking. But I don't know, I always feel with things like that, you know, it's sort of this emotional catharsis for the reader at the expense of minorities. So I don't know. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. I would be curious to know, because I think that it warrants some discussion at least. And then the next book that I read for Pride Month was Queer, A Graphic History by Meg-John and Julia Scheele. And this is basically what it says. It's a graphic non-fiction book. And I will link down below to a video that is called A Look Inside, where they show quite a few of the pages in this book. It's a video by the publisher. If you can ignore the super annoying music they put on top of it for some reason. The problem is they also talk over the music, so you can't really mute the video unless you just want to see the pictures. And I had prior knowledge about queer theory, I should add, so I had a seminar when I was still at university, but this was a nice refresher. I learned some new things as well along the way. It talks about the history of the word queer, how it used to have a different meaning, how it then used to be used as an insult, and then has since been reappropriated, but it's also still hotly debated in the LGBTQ plus community, where some people really like queer theory and the word queer, and others really dislike it. And the reason for that is because queer theory doesn't like fixed categories and doesn't like fixed binaries like male, female, homosexual, heterosexual, because it argues that you always then exclude some people because you have this strict binary, and people that don't fit into that might fall to the wayside. But the critique of that is that if you don't use identity categories, it becomes that much harder to fight for rights. So the book really talks about that, which I appreciate, and doesn't just gloss over the fact. Some things I learned were the way that gender and sexuality are looked at in other non-Western countries. So for example, it talks about the Hijra in India, the Tom and Dee in Thailand, and Bisu, Kalabai and Kalalai in Indonesia, which were identity categories that I didn't know beforehand. But the thing is, the book doesn't really explain them, it just shows them, so I googled them myself and found out more about it. So a lot of these are just pointers for you to go on and read more and find out more on your own. So it's you sort of have to do some extra work apart from this. I think some aspects were covered really well in here, like bisexuality, but for example asexuality only gets one teeny tiny paragraph in this whole book. It was, I think, 2 sentences, so very little, which I thought was a bit disappointing. But I still enjoyed this. If you're looking for a starting point, I think I would recommend this. And yeah, that's all I have for this one. The final book that I read for Pride Month so far was George by Alex Gino, and again I listened to this on audiobook, so I don't have the book here to show you. And this is a middle grade or children's book story, and it is about George, who's a 10-year-old girl, but the thing is, the people around her, her family, her friends, her teachers, they don't know that she is a girl, and she is sort of hiding that from people. She's scared for people to find out. And the basic plotline of the book is that George wants to be in the school theatre play, which is an adaptation of Charlotte's Web. And by the way, if you haven't read Charlotte's Web, read it before you read this book, because it flat out spoils the ending of Charlotte's Web. And the thing is, George wants to play Charlotte. So things sort of develop from there. And it's a coming out story about being transgender. It doesn't hide the fact that this can be difficult and that there can be negative reactions by people, but it also shows that there can be support from people that you might not have expected to support you, and that some people just might need a little time to come around to understanding who you really are and to respecting that. In that way, I thought it was a nuanced story, and I liked that. Some things that I didn't particularly like about it were the fact that gender is portrayed a bit stereotypical in this. So, for example, Kelly, George's best friend, tells her that, you know, as a girl, when you dress up, that means you're gonna wear a dress or a skirt. So sort of like these traditional ideas about what it means to be girly, wearing pink clothes and stuff like that. So kind of boxing in what it means to be a woman or a girl. But at the same time, Kelly herself is not a girly girl. And also George's mom is sort of not really adhering to traditional gender roles. So it is, in a way, also subverted a bit, but that's just something to look out for in it. And then I listened to the German the German translation, which was done by Alexandra Ernst, and I listened to it on audio, like I said, and there was some music in between the chapters that was just really annoying. And I know that is not part of the book, but it was part of the listening experience. I'm not sure if it's also in the English one, but the music was just this wishy-washy piano music that sort of like showed you what kind of feelings you were supposed to have. Like, now feel sad, this is a sad situation, and now feel upbeat because there's some hope. And I don't need that. I know I have my own emotions and I can respond to a book. Just that was annoying. But so yeah, those are the 3 books I read so far for Pride Month, and let's get into the other 3 books that I read so far. The next one is another non-fiction graphic book, so I kind of got into those, I guess, and that is Derrida for Beginners by Jim Powell, and this was illustrated by Van Howell. And I read only one text by Jacques Derrida when I was at university. It was a short article and that took me long enough. If you don't know who Jacques Derrida is, he was a French philosopher who lived from 1930 to 2004. He is the founding father, I guess, of deconstruction, which is a theory that basically tries to subvert binaries like male-female. It subverts the hierarchies that are inherent in these, but it goes beyond that in trying to dissolve these binaries and having an endless play of meanings. And if you're confused by now, then you're supposed to. Because the way that Jacques Derrida writes, if you ever try to read something by him, or if you have read something by him, you know that you're not really supposed to completely understand his text. He's writing in a way that, it also says this on the back of the book here, that basically like you constantly feel like the rug is being pulled out from under your feet. Which is fun, but also can be very irritating if you're trying to get meaning, which, well, he doesn't want you to, or he doesn't only want you to. And I still think this was fairly accessible, and you know, from what I just said, Jim Powell basically attempts to do something that you're not supposed to do with Derrida, trying to explain him and give meaning to him and assign it, and he talks about that, and I think this covers a lot of ground. It gives you sort of a quick introduction to Derrida's major works. It talks about his life. It also talks about some controversy that he was involved in, about the philosopher Paul de Man, who he was friends with. But after Paul de Man's death, it was discovered that he had written some anti-Semitic articles for Nazi Germany. And Derrida then wrote a book about Paul de Man, and in a way used deconstruction to say, oh, maybe Paul de Man was actually doing the opposite of what he was doing, and he was very much critiqued for that. But at the same time, he distanced himself from other people who were associated with anti-Semitism, and he himself comes from a Jewish family. So it's just interesting the way he reacted to this, and they were close friends, so I don't know, maybe this was his way of like dealing with it, to find that out after his death. But yeah, it also covers these things, and yeah, it made me want to read more theories, so that's always nice. And yeah, that's all I have for that one. And by that point, I guess I was on a sort of a graphic novel kick, and I took this one out of the library, and it's in English, it's called Lightness. It's by Catherine Meurice, who is French, and she was one of the people working at Charlie Hebdo at the time that the attacks of the 7th of January in 2015 were happening. So if you don't remember, Charlie Hebdo is a satirical magazine, and in 2015 two Islamists, and I want to point out Islamists, that has nothing to do with the religion of Islam, it's an extremist version of it and it's ridiculous. What they did was they entered the headquarters, forced their way in, and they killed 12 people working at Charlie Hebdo, or sort of working near the office. Of all things, on that day, Catherine Meurice was late for work because her boyfriend had broken up with her the day before, and she was in bed and couldn't get out of bed. And by the time she got to the office, people told her not to go inside, and she actually was hiding in another building and heard the gunshots that killed her co-workers. So this deals with the trauma that this obviously caused for her, but it also deals with Catherine trying to find lightness again, and the way she tries to find it is by traveling to Rome and trying to find beauty in art, and it is both very sad at times. She really struggles with the events. She sort of has like post-traumatic stress disorder, and like sort of disassociation of her identity. She struggles with remembering things from before the attack, and so it deals with that. But since she worked at Charlie Hebdo, it also uses humor to cope with the things that she's gone through, and it is funny at times. For example, there is one page in here, and I will link down below to a review of this that has 3 pages taken from the book, so you can look at some of the pages to see what the art style is like. There's one page in here that has all these different pictures of the catchphrase "Je suis Scheele," which was going around the globe back in 2015. People showing solidarity, saying "I am Charlie Hebdo," so "Je suis Scheele." And you see this picture where it's in the supermarket, it's on every product, you see the flyers that are being vacuumed up the street, you see it in the church, you see people protesting, holding up signs like it, and then you see the headquarters of Charlie Hebdo, where the people working there sit there and asking themselves, who am I? And are the only ones who apparently have an identity crisis. So that was, you know, sad and funny at the same time. And then there's another one where she sits on the couch at a therapist's office and he tells her, you know, you've lived through the attack on Charlie Hebdo and you survived. And she says, well, je suis Scheele, I am Charlie. And then he says, people were killed in the club Bataclan in Paris. And she says, I am Bataclan. And then he talks about the attacks on Boulevard Voltaire. And she says, I am Voltaire. And the therapist goes, maybe you're a bit of a megalomaniac. And you know, this way of like poking fun at the situation that is so incredibly hard to deal with made me like this even more. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this graphic novel. I thought it was really well done. And then the last book I want to talk to you about is a poetry collection, and it's called Du bist nicht allein. The English translation would be You Are Not Alone. And this is by Arif Hamza. Arif Hamza is a Syrian poet who was very successful in Syria as a poet, one of the important younger voices. And this is a dual language edition, so you have the German version on one side and the Arabic version on the other side. And this poetry collection was absolutely beautiful. It deals with very, very heavy subjects. It deals with the war in Syria, it deals with being a refugee, it deals with loss, with the brutality of the war, very heavy subjects. It deals with trauma, but it's beautifully written. It is so accessible at the same time. This has become my new favorite poetry collection. I will definitely go and reread this. Now, some of the poems by Arif Hamza have been translated into English, and I will link down below to those translations. But I have to say that English translations are not very good, sadly. I think Sandra Hetzel, who did the German translations, has done a fantastic job. If you do read by some chance German or Arabic, I can only imagine how beautiful the original is, and you can deal with these subjects, then I would highly encourage you to check out this collection. If you only read English, by all means still read the poems. The subjects are still important, but these translations don't do his poetry justice in any way, unfortunately. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye guys!